Hello, my name is Tetiana Koldunenko, and I'm a Sydney-based artist who studies and celebrates the unique character of the Australian bush. My work combines shallow sculptural relief and realistic painting, focusing on the individuality of native trees and plants. Date of recording is 17th of June 2026. My artistic practice is both a way of living and learning, a way to connect with this land and its people. Through painting, I am discovering Australian nature. When I first arrived in Australia, I was fascinated by the abundance of color throughout the year. However, it took me years to realize that eucalypts bloom up there, high in the canopy. I became captivated by the unique forms, textures, and colors of the bush. Over time, that fascination developed into deep connection with this land and its native flora. Each of my current works begins as a wide, shallow sculptural relief created with texture paste and then develops into a highly detailed, realistic tapestry of color built through multiple layers. I use acrylic paints because they dry fast. This technique allows me to analyze shapes first, create compositions, and find rhythm among both smooth and textured surfaces. It also gives my painting a tactile, three-dimensional quality. I am Ukrainian-Australian artist based in Sydney. I was born and raised in Kyiv, Ukraine, and I moved to Australia in 2010. I studied at the Kyiv National Academy of Fine Arts and Architecture, later continued my studies at the Florence Design Academy in Italy, and completed a Master of Design with honors at UNSW in Sydney. My background is very classical and structured, but also international. This combination gives me both the strong discipline and sense of freedom. Classical art training gave me a solid foundation in drawing, composition, and materials, but also the ability to expand beyond those rules in my current practice. I grew up in a culture where nature is observed very closely and with great attention to detail. You can see this, for example, in Ukrainian traditional embroidery, where plants and geometric motifs are incredibly rich and carefully constructed. That sensitivity to detail stayed with me. When I arrived in Australia, I was fascinated by the landscape, but I didn't immediately understand it. It took me time to learn how to read it. In a way, my artistic practice became a process of learning this new environment. My classical training also plays a role here. It gives me a framework, almost like a language for observing, analyzing, and then reconstructing what I see. So my background and my current environment are constantly in a dialogue in my work. Yes, definitely. I came from a culture where there is a strong appreciation for nature and its detail. I think that way of seeing influenced me deep. When I look at the Australian bush, I don't see it as a single mass or background. I see it as individual species, each with its own color, character, form, and presence. That approach comes directly from my upbringing and visual culture. My influences come from prominent Ukrainian artists. I deeply admire Alexander Murashko, who was the founder of Art Academy in Kyiv. I feel I inherited a sensitivity to color through that tradition. I also love the work of Katerina Bilokur, who painted nature, plants, fruits, flowers with extraordinary care, patience, and emotional depth. There is a real sense of devotion in her work. And I am also inspired by Fedor Krzyzewski, especially his sense of rhythm and structure in composition. These artists are from the last century, but they are worth looking up. I am preparing for my next solo exhibition, which will be at the Gallery 1111 in Epping, Sydney, in September 2026. In this new body of work, I am exploring how different Australian plant species interact with light. Some seem to absorb it, some reflect it, and some appear almost translucent. I am very interested in these differences and how light changes the perception of form. I'm also thinking a lot about contrast between environments. The light in Australia is much harsher and more direct than in Ukraine. So, in a way, I think I am painting Australian nature but with Ukrainian light. For me, the biggest challenge is balance, finding the right balance between life, work, and studio practice. Artistic thinking is very spontaneous by nature. It doesn't always fit neatly into schedule. At the same time, you need discipline and structure in order to produce consistent work. Living between spontaneity and structure is probably the most challenging part of being an artist. What advice would you give to your younger self? I would suggest to believe in yourself. Yes, I have been experimenting widely and I tried many different materials and approaches over time, and I still enjoy experimentation very much. When I was living in Europe, I had the opportunity to visit art supply factories and learn directly from the producers about how materials are made and what is possible to do with them, which was very valuable. However, in my current public practice, I focus on a more defined visual language and technique. That consistency allows the work to become more recognizable and cohesive. I usually don't listen to music. Instead, I often listen to scientific conferences or lectures on history, politics, psychology, art, and health. When my hands are busy, my mind prefers to stay active and engage. I found that this kind of intellectual background sound supports my focus while I work. Throughout my art, I aim to highlight the uniqueness and beauty of the Australian nature. I hope I encourage viewers to see the bush not as a uniform green gray landscape, but as a collection of distinctive individual species. I often include species names into my artwork titles. I believe that familiarity and understanding inspire a deeper connection with the Australian landscape and greater appreciation of the natural environment.